practical class. They came with their babies. They were able to talk about some of the difficulties and things that they had. And again, they had a postnatal discharge class that had broader information. It wasn't just focused on breastfeeding. It was recognizing risk factors and different things like that, danger signs in your baby. But a lot of it, again, was focused on building confidence in mum before they left the hospital. And then they also had the lactation clinic, and there was a lot of hands-on help that was available with the lactation nurses that was on the postnatal ward. So if they ran into real problems, they could go into the lactation clinic while they were there, but they could also go back. And one of the unique things actually about the clinic was that they had women there who were coming in to pump. Because there was such an emphasis on breastfeeding within that culture, women who worked in the hospital would have come in and pumped and to get pass milk onto them babies and their children as well. And so you had that mix of experienced mums with new mums, and they learnt together, and it developed an inbuilt peer support system within the clinic, and they exchanged contact details, and then they were able to follow up with each other. So they didn't just have professional support, but within the community culture, actually then they were also developing relationships. And finally, they had additional support within the neonatal unit and different areas too, where there were complex cases. So then we wanted to look at the motivational profile of the women who were coming out. We'd examined the organisational culture, but we also wanted to look at, well, what's actually happening with the mums here too. And so this is the process that we used to do this. So it was a forward and back translation of the breastfeeding motivational instructional scale, and that was forward translated into Thai, back following the WHO protocol, and then you can see the process. And interestingly, when we actually went to examine this and to analyse this, it showed a very high skewedness and kurtosis within it. So that made it difficult in some ways from point of view of factor analysis and things like that. But the indicators showed that actually that high value for breastfeeding was there. The majority of women responded in very positively to the questions, and it reflected what we had seen on the wards. So what does that tell us? Well, obviously the community culture had an influence within this. The Thai culture tends generally to be a culture that gathers around and supports women and is pro-breastfeeding. But at the same time, there are a lot of media influences, and there's a lot of socioeconomic pressure on the women as well. And so it's looking at, well, how does that work? How does that influence? But within this context, with the education that we were able to see, and the way that the midwives worked with the women and the reinforcement of the goals, actually it showed that consistent goal structure right through the education process. There was also a normalization of breastfeeding challenges. It wasn't a case of, oh, you might get this or you maybe see this, but actually whenever the women were able to express postnatally, well, I've had this, it was, okay, this is what you've got, this is how you address it. And there was also within the education inclusion of family. And family is very much a core element of Thai culture. And so it was actually an expectation within the situation there that the family joined in with the classes. And so not only were the mums getting the information, but actually the family were too. And even within the clinic at times, family members came with them. And you saw that interplay between the mums and the babies and the family members and the health professionals. And there was one situation in particular whenever I was observing, whenever the mum was sitting and she was going, I can't do this. And her husband said, actually, yes, you can. You just need to change the baby's position. You just need to move it slightly. And the mum was working with the dad, and they did it. They overcame it, which meant that actually when she went home, the dad was there too. So what are the implications for our practice within this? Thailand is in Southeast Asia, it's a long way away. But actually understanding those cultural and contextual factors are critical in breastfeeding, and particularly within motivation as well. And we know ourselves here, there's a lot of cultural influences that interplay with women's motivation here. Really starting to look at those and examine those at that deeper level, both at the national level and also at the corporate level, helped us to understand that interplay of factors and what was actually happening that had created that motivational influence. The inclusion of those cultural factors, one of the things that we saw within our research right the way through the education program was what we called the Thai way. There was this constant message within it. Well, this is how we do it as Thais. This is what benefits us as Thais. This is as a Thai baby. You've had a Thai baby who is important in society, and actually, as Thais, this is the value. And it added that additional value component into the motivation as to. Woman-centred care changes depending on the context, and as we are in an increasingly global world, actually I think there's a level where we have to really start to look at that in more detail. We need to think about the cultural values that women come with. I was in India 3 weeks ago, and everywhere I went, people stared at me. It was just, that's a given over there, it's a norm. But over here, that's actually considered to be something that's rude, and it's that crossover of cultural values in our global world that you realise has a much bigger impact at times. So whenever we're working with women, you're looking at the national culture, you're looking at the corporate culture, but there's the personal culture as well, and how women communicate, how they respond, and adjusting our care to that so that it definitely is women-centred. Within Thailand, the women-centred care worked much more on a community-based and a community-based approach. But actually here, the focus is more on individualised care. But how do we marry that within a global world? And that's part of what we're starting to look at now.